We took it all. We brought them to our land. An endless night, ember hot and icy cold. The rage of the earth. We made this curse. Carved it in the blood on our backs. We did not see. We could not, but she did. And in the end...
What will I become?
Senua's Saga. Hellblade 2.
Play it now with Game Pass.
Phil kept asking Michael, who's open? Who's open? And Michael didn't want to engage in that conversation, and Phil kept asking it. And finally, begrudgingly, Jordan said, Paxson.
It's June 91, Bulls at Lakers, NBA Finals Game 5. This is Remember That Game, the podcast about sporting events that take you on a journey and maybe chart the path of the zeitgeist. I'm your host, Thomas Emerick, and my guest is Roland Lazenby, author of Michael Jordan, The Life, and his newest release, Magic, The Life of Earvin Magic Johnson. He's one of the great American storytellers and covered this 1991 Finals. How are you, Roland, and what's it like for you to revisit this collision of forces of nature?
I've revisited that force of nature that is MJ quite a bit over the years. Spent a lot of time with those Bulls throughout the 90s. And, it's one of the highlights of my life, my working life. And, it's always coming back to me during the pandemic. Back in that era, I record a lot of interviews with cassette tape. And cassette tape was notoriously difficult because you just rewind and rewind and rewind looking for stuff. And I would be on deadline a lot, and I had a lot of interviews that I couldn't find. And my wife digitized all of my tapes, hundreds of them, during the pandemic. And there was one from earlier that year, April of 91. I was in Washington for the Bullets, and the Bullets were playing the Lakers. And so suddenly Jerry Krause, the GM of the Bulls, shows up at the Bullets-Lakers game. And I'm thinking, why is he here? And then it hit me. He had worked as a scout for the Bullets. That was really his big intro into and for the old Baltimore Bullets in particular. He'd worked as a scout for the Bullets, and then he'd worked as a scout for the Lakers. And so here he was in April of 1991. The Bulls were just kicking ass. And he was so proud of the fact that he was the GM of this team, and it looked like they were the team that was really going to make some noise in the playoffs. And he had sort of showed up at this Lakers-Bullets game to gloat. And I remember going down to the locker room after the game to do interviews. And there he was, standing outside the Bullets locker room. I think he was hoping reporters would see him and talk to him. And he was standing there all alone. And I almost felt sorry for the guy. And plus, it's a chance to talk to, a GM of a top team. So I wasn't working on Bulls projects then, but I stopped to talk to him and recorded an interview. And he was so full of pride and so hopeful. And as you and a lot of your listeners will know, the Bulls obviously went on this great run over the 90s. But it ended up so poorly. They ended up fighting, and it ended up being a very bitter thing. Years later, Krause would tell me, I've got videotape of every one of those games throughout the decade. I've never watched one of them. He was so bitter and angry. And to see what it had come from, he was so proud of that team in 91. And to see where it went was tough. But, Krause would always pick at Jordan, and say things that angered him unnecessarily. And Jordan would go back at him and tease him in ways that were not good for either one of them. But anyway, that finals, as proud as Krause was and as great as the Bulls were looking down the stretch, there weren't many people picking the Bulls to beat the Lakers in the 91 finals. And, that game one, wow. Sam Perkins hit a shot and the Lakers stole one in Chicago. And boom, everyone just assumed, oh, we were right. These Lakers are going to use their experience. But of course, James Worthy had a very bad ankle, and that would end up proving the difference. But the big moment for the Bulls in Game 5 that you're speaking of, the Bulls had been trying to learn the triangle offense for a couple of years by then. And as Tex Winter, the guy who basically developed the triangle offense, he was a dear friend of mine. And we would talk all the time. And he said, and he would say this later of Kobe Bryant, but he said it first of Michael Jordan. He said, Michael is such a high wire act. He has so much athletic ability and athletic talent. And you never know if he's going to go by the offense or if he's going to just go on his own and take over a game and win it with his talent. And it was always this not knowing, this high wire act for those Bulls. And Tex would sit there taking notes on everything furiously on the Bulls bench. And he wondered in that playoff if it was going to, if Michael was going to play team ball or if he was going to try and win it all himself. And he had shown periods of that. Obviously, the Bulls jumped out and after that first loss and really got down to business. Magic was very jealous of Michael with all of his endorsement money and all of what he called his tennis shoe cash. And he would later make up stories of all kinds of things, trying to level the playing field in later years, but it wasn't the case. And boy, I got to Game 5, the game you're talking about. And the guy who was most amazed at this and really emphasized it to me was Steve Kerr. And Steve wasn't even on the Bulls roster then. He was not playing, but the scene that really made Game 5 famous became a scene in Bulls lore. The players and succeeding versions of the Bulls would talk about what Phil said to Michael Jordan that day.
And I encourage folks to also check out Roland's Phil Jackson bio, Mind Games. What does the way this Game 5 unfolds say about the growth of Michael Jordan and the coaching prowess of Phil Jackson? And what was it like to just be there, sideline, press row, as the Bulls navigate trailing in their first finals closeout game?
Right. They were obviously close on things, and they didn't know how to close out, and that would always be one of the things that Phil Jackson really stressed, having the discipline to close out games, close out quarters, close out halves. It's how you finish. You can have a big quarter and then you can get lax and allow the other team to, score some points at the end of the quarter and lose all the edge you get out of it. So that coaching staff was always stressing that. But Michael was having the kind of night where, he was trying in that zone that I was talking about with Tex Winter, where he would be trying to do things himself.
Right.
And they were in a huddle late in the game, and Paxson had been having a good game, but he hadn't gotten a lot of shots, a tremendous number to that point. And Phil had gotten increasingly irritated with Michael. Michael was so fierce about closing things out, and they were in a huddle, and Phil kept asking Michael, "Who's open? Who's open?" And Michael didn't want to engage in that conversation, and Phil kept asking it. And finally, begrudgingly, Jordan said, "Paxson." And Phil famously said, "Well, throw him the fucking ball." And that was not how coaches related to Michael. And Phil Jackson had always been very diplomatic in a lot of ways. Those Bulls had needed some seasoning to get to that point. He would put Scottie Pippen, who was a young player. They had always had so much trouble battling those physical Pistons teams. And I'd spent 5 years traveling with them doing their yearbooks. And those Pistons guys were good guys. It was a lot of fun. And but the Bulls couldn't handle all that physicality. It was really hard on Pippen, and in the they got close in the 90 game, and Pippen came down with this famous
Right.
migraine headache. Michael said, "Fuck him, let him play blind." And that was Jordan.
NBA and NBC intro package for the series, Marv Albert poses what he calls the ultimate question: which player is better at lifting up his teammates?
I think Magic has this image of being the guy with the smile and the big heart and the warmth and all that. But, if you dropped one of Magic's passes, he could get all up in your case. And I mean, he would not hesitate. That dated back to high school. He could get all over teammates. And Michael was really, could be a very difficult person. He had tremendous charisma, and the press obviously loved him, as did the fan base. But he was a difficult dude as a teammate. And and I would have to ask him about that. I was doing a bunch of projects on the Bulls through that period, and it came down to doing a book on the Last Dance season. I wrote a book called Blood on the Horns that was, really trying to explain how the team had all that success and yet couldn't go forward anymore. They just had too many hard feelings. And I had talked to Phil earlier, and he said, and Phil would give me a good amount of time back then. He and Krause had been in a war since the Chicago Tribune book division had hired me to start writing about the Bulls and doing a series of books on them. And I later did books for other publishers. But Phil would say, it was amazing to walk in another arena somewhere and to have Michael Jordan on your roster. It was just, you just can't imagine the feelings of conquest and superiority and all those things you start to feel when you have a player like that. But Phil said, it's the day between games when it's really, really difficult to deal with Michael Jordan. And so for that Last Dance season, I had gotten all this information about how George had repeatedly humiliated Jerry Krause on the team bus during the 97 finals. I mean, he'd drink a couple of beers and smoke a cigar, and they were driving back to Park City where they were staying after the games in Utah. And Jordan would be at the back of the bus just taunting Krause. Jerry Krause! Jerry Krause! Let's go fishing, Jerry Krause! And he was pretty lit up by then. And Krause would sit there frowning, sort of. And everybody knew Jordan was just a terror on that team bus. He could get on his teammates or anybody and just had a wicked, wicked, wicked sense of humor. And he said, Jerry Krause, let's go fishing. Don't worry, if we don't catch anything, you can just eat the bait yourself. But he would say all kinds of things. That was some of the mildest part of it. It got real, and everybody on the bus was like, please shut up. And it just, and this wasn't the part that Jordan would allow into the Last Dance. They didn't want to have those revelations. He did not explain. But that's why at the end of the 97 season, right through to the opening of the 97-98 Last Dance season, Krause came in there and said, Phil's done. He blamed Phil Jackson for not controlling Jordan better. He said, Phil's done. I don't care if we go 82-0. Phil's finished. This is his last season. He's already been informed of that. It's made clear. And of course, that was Krause throwing down the gauntlet. He was so angry and so out of control in his anger. He had taken so much crap from Phil and from Jordan finally. And so that really just set the whole organization on edge, that Phil, with all these championships, was going to be dismissed as a coach. And Jordan said, we're going to turn this around. And so it set up this whole drama for the end of the thing. In truth, Phil had spent years bending over backwards to accommodate Krause, because Krause could be very difficult. But by about 95, they just didn't like each other. And Phil would give me these one-on-one interviews in his office where he would say all this wicked shit about Krause. Just, he would say things like, yeah, Jerry Krause, the last thing Michael likes to do before a game, he likes to go back to John, take a dump last thing before he go to play. And so many times he said Jerry Krause would go back there and want to sit on the John beside Jordan. And it would infuriate Jordan to have his privacy violated. And, Phil would say, yeah, he had this need for intimacy. And he knew that telling me that in an on-the-record interview I was going to obviously have to go to Krause and ask him.
Yeah.
And that just blew up Krause and Reinsdorf. It just became a shit-slinging contest between them. And it had been building for 4 or 5 years.
Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 5 million members. It's the most fun and exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats for your shot to win up to 100 times your cash. I made my first $10 deposit and received an instant $10 bonus. And if you have the skills, you can play for a shot of turning your $10 into $1,000. And playoff time is the best time to join the Prize Picks community of over 5 million members who have already downloaded the app. Prize Picks is available in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and Georgia. Download the app today and use the code BLUEWIRE for a first deposit match up to $100. That's a first deposit match of up to $100 when you download the app and use the code BLUEWIRE. Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
We took it all. We brought them to our land. An endless night, ember hot and icy cold. The rage of the earth. We made this curse. Carved it in the blood on our backs. We did not see. We could not, but she did. And in the end...
What will I become? Senua's Saga. Hellblade 2.
Play it now with Game Pass.
That's incredible. Yeah, just 4 years earlier with Krause brimming with pride and Washington. In 91, much less adversity. Bulls trample the Eastern Conference outside of Hersey Hawkins 3 in Philly. Bulls win every playoff game heading into the finals. Hit that adversity game 1, Perkins hitting the 3. After game 2, Bulls win by 21, even the series, go back to LA. Jordan talked about, seemed like Relish saying he had more of a point guard role that game.
He had a bunch of assists, a ton of assists.
How much of an influence was Magic for MJ?
Well, when MJ was in high school, Magic was winning the NCAA championship and then going to the Lakers. And it's funny, my book, Michael Jordan, The Life, here behind me, is in 22 languages, and it just got it's being released in German, and I had to write an epilogue to it because it came out 10 years ago in 2014, and so I was writing about Michael's high school girlfriend, Laquita Robinson. And she had, I had tried to interview her for the book and couldn't get her to return my calls. And then the book came out and she read it and she called me and wanted to be interviewed. And she was really neat. But she was a cheerleader for Southern Wayne High School. She had leg braces. She had a form of juvenile arthritis. And she and Jordan, sort of one night when the two schools played, she and Jordan sort of, got the vibe. And pretty soon they were dating. She dated him all the way through his freshman year and the NCAA championship in '82 for North Carolina. But she was the one, Michael was so taken with Magic and his, the amazing passes that Magic could throw and the no-look passes and all the kinds of things, the way Magic played the game. It was really amazing to watch Magic Johnson play. And Jordan was one of those guys just watching it on TV and was nuts about it. And he would try to play like Magic in practice at Laney High School. He would try to throw no-look passes and he wasn't the point guard for his team, but he liked to fancy himself as a point guard. And so his teammates began calling him Magic Mike. And Laquita Robinson, his girlfriend, bought him a vanity plate for his car, Magic Mike. And he rode all over his hometown of Wilmington as Magic Mike. And the funny thing was when Jordan got to North Carolina as a freshman, Dean Smith said, I don't know. There's only one magic. You got to lose that license plate.
And then in game one, MJ seems insistent on guarding Magic. Game two and on, it looks like the Bulls throw Scottie at him more.
It was an accident. As the coaches explained to me, they started off with Michael on him. Michael, obviously, incredible defender and athlete. But Michael got some quick fouls. And so they threw Scottie on him, and they realized that Scottie Pippen, he was taller. He was listed at 6'7". He was really probably taller than that. But his arms were incredibly long. And Scottie, of course, was like this uber role player. He could do anything. He was basically the Bulls' point guard. And, the triangle is a two-guard front, so it's not like other teams or other offenses where it relies on a point guard. Now, Jordan had played point guard for Doug Collins one particular season. I think it may have been 87, 86, somewhere in there. But it was not, the point guard wasn't there was somebody to initiate the offense, but the two guard front would come up the floor and alleviate pressure. And if somebody tried to pressure one guard, you'd have that other guard right there. And they could handle things that way. And it was a two-guard front in the half court. But Pippen was the guy who, the phrase that Tex Winter used was initiated the offense. And Pippen was usually the guy that initiated the offense. You would have other people initiate it. A lot of times it could be a John Paxson or Steve Kerr, because the guard of the two guards out front, the one that initiated it would usually cut through to the corner. And this created the unbalanced floor that was the triangle. And the three-point shooter would cut to the corner, and you'd have to go out and cover Kerr or Paxson. They were too good. And so what that did is that created an unbalanced floor. And the idea was to put Jordan opposite of the three-point shooter over behind the defense. And the triangle would be set up so that with the three-point shooter in the far corner, Jordan on the opposite side of the court behind the defense, it was really, really hard to get a double team on Jordan. And later, Phil Jackson wouldn't let Kobe Bryant occupy that spot that Jordan had. Kobe wanted it badly and had studied the offense with the Lakers. Eventually, Phil would let him have that spot because that was really the attack point in a lot of ways. And they tried to get variable looks, but it really would depend on if Jordan or Kobe in that offense would be what they called a ball stopper. The ball would stop with him, the ball movement would die, and things would happen there. But by and large, the Bulls had been beaten up so much by the Pistons. That's really what made them championship worthy, according to Tex Winter, what he felt and told me. And by the time the 91 playoffs rolled around, the Bulls were really very tough. And Phil Jackson, every day in practice, put Scottie Pippen on Michael Jordan, and they would just go at it. Because Pippen was, he wasn't real strong mentally at first. He and Harsh Grant were buddies. And they were really just young goof-off party guys to a degree. One day they missed practice, and Johnny Bach, the old elderly assistant coach, was furious with them, and they showed up late. And Scottie's cat had died. And Horace wanted to have a moment of silence for Scottie's cat. And Johnny Bach said, "Fuck Scottie's cat. We're We're not messing with that. We're
Yeah.
here to practice. You guys don't miss practice for a dead cat. Just funny stuff.
In the triangle, the shooter opposite Jordan and Paxson hit some big shots in game 5. In game 2, those passers out of the post and people slash into the lane. Cliff Levingston famously throws to Michael Jordan while flashing to the hoop, followed by the iconic suspension of gravity between Sam Perkins and AC Green, tongue out, 2 points, 2 Lakers seemingly in disbelief. What was the energy like in Chicago leading up to that game 2, and how did it shift after that game and going back to LA?
Oh, it was crazy energy. The Bulls in the finals against Magic, and the Bulls ticket guy had a hilarious story. He was going insane. Everybody in the world wanted tickets to that finals. I mean, it was, they'd had the bad boys for a long time, and here was Magic back in the finals, and Michael. Everybody had been waiting on him to get to the championship round, and the ticket manager told me. I think his name's O'Neill. I have to go back and look. It's been a while since I did the interview, but his days were miserable. All these people wanted tickets. All the players wanted extra tickets. It was old Chicago Stadium. There was every kind of constraint, and he just came home and he complained to his wife, "I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't get the tickets for people." She said, "I know what you can do. You can take out the trash." So he goes to take out the trash, and he's putting it out on the street. The light comes on his next door neighbors, and the guy runs out and says, "Hey, Joe," it's Joe O'Neill. "Hey, Joe, I need 2. Can you get them for me for the finals?" And he said, I was in a deep, dark spot. I got orders for 2 tickets just taking out the trash.
Oh,
And so it was insane. I mean, and Chicago Stadium, it's hard to describe how loud that place could be, especially in those Pistons contests. I remember in 91, with my fingers in my ears trying to block out the noise, sitting on press row. And the whole arena is screaming at Bill Laimbeer of the Pistons. "Laimbeer sucks." And I mean, you just can't imagine how it was pounding. And you could put your fingers in your ears. It didn't matter. I mean, it was just ridiculous. And so the atmosphere was, it was very different from when it started. When it started, they did when the Jordan era started. The Blackhawks were the dominant team in the arena, and they in the early days they wouldn't even bother to take the plexiglass down from the hockey games. Basketball fans had to watch a lot of the game in certain spots through the plexiglass. That changed soon enough because Jordan totally changed the culture in Chicago. And so it was very crazy in those first 2 games at home. Of course, they promptly lost the first, and everybody thought they were done, but they swept it from there.
they win the next 4 back when it was 2-3-2 format. So they take game 5 in Inglewood.
Yeah.
108, 101. Magic and MJ, hugely marketable finals at a key time for the NBA, and they're still playing ball as long as there's clock on it. And the game's realistically over, and MJ's beating Magic to a loose ball and blocking Magic's shot like almost at the buzzer in a 7-point game. MJ then hugs the trophy and helps carry the NBA into the 21st century, even with the 98 retirement. The epilogue for Magic continues on with a tremendous impact in many ways. And again, I encourage folks to grab Roland's latest biography, Magic, The Life of Earvin, Magic Johnson. Do you see Magic and MJ's and this finals here, this critical juncture for the NBA? Do you see the impact reflected in the NBA you see today and this year's finals 33 years later?
That's an interesting question. In 2001, David Stern, who was then the commissioner, the late David Stern, well, the NBA had just come through an unbelievable period from 1984 when David Stern had become the commissioner. But in 2001, he allowed Jerry Colangelo, the owner of the Suns, on the competition committee to remake the game of basketball. And it took a number of years for those changes to really change the game. But the game is so dramatically different today. I am starting to see, the game has really de-emphasized the post player. It has de-emphasized the post shot, the post play for the 3-point shot. And that led to exciting period for the Warriors. They were a team that could play that way, shooting the 3-pointer. The rest of the league could not. It wasn't very good. But it's gotten better. And the defense has gotten better. It's learned to deal a little more with this. I think the great players, no matter the rules or interpretations of the rules, the great players would be great in any era. Wilt Chamberlain would be great today. Jordan could have played at any time. Guys like, the guys on that Celtics roster could play in any era. And guys on the Mavericks roster a lot of them could play in any era and could have been, they both have. I don't know yet. I just have to see if Porzingis is back. But the Mavs have they have some bigs, in Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford, and it's not just. It is largely the duo of Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic, but they have a really good team. The Mavs do. I don't think they're as good as the Celtics, but sometimes you get shown things nobody's expecting, and so it reminds me a little bit of '91 in that an awful lot of people don't think the Mavericks will have a chance to win, and they've had an improbable run to the NBA Finals, but they could end up playing very well, finishing games like they should, as they did in every round, and really using their guard play along with some really good interior defense and shot blocking to win a championship. I don't think they will. I'm not a betting man, so I'm not putting any money on it. But I think it'll at least be interesting.
Yeah. Could they, with that length you mentioned, could they give them a little bit of trouble, kind of the way the Lakers managed to with like Vlade Divac and Sam Perkins and company?
Yeah, the key to the Lakers' failure was James Worthy's ankle. James Worthy was their pressure release guy. Yes, he's a forward, a small forward. He's a tall guy, 6'9", as his listed height, but he was a fine ball handler. And when teams pressured Magic, Worthy was often the pressure release guy, and not having him meant that Magic, and the key to that series was Magic had to play so much. They really didn't have anyone with Worthy's injury, anyone that could give him much rest. And Phil Jackson just realized when they saw how effective Pippen was on Magic and stopped really cutting down on his ability just to feed the post right over the top of the head of the defender. They pretty much seal the deal there. They figured Magic couldn't play all those minutes and keep it up, and he could not. He wore down.
This has been another episode of Remember That Game. Please rate, review, subscribe, and check out more episodes.